Okay, well, I'd like to now hand over to Stuart to introduce us to Grade Centre.
Thanks, Lynn. And as it says up there, that Grade Centre, we're looking at the how can we use it differently in a more potent way and a more proficient way, and that's what we're going to look at this afternoon. Nothing anywhere near rocket science type of a presentation, a very, very practical session, and hopefully that will do just what it says, help us to become more proficient with the use of Grade Centre. And one of the main things is to realise that Grade Centre is more than just an administrative area. I know there is a legacy of looking at Grade Centre in that way, because that's what we were accustomed with when we had Interact 1 and Sakai. But there's a lot more in Grade Centre, and a lot more coming in Grade Centre apparently, from what Blackboard tells us. And so we just want to work out how could we perhaps be using Grade Centre to be more efficient and in not only just using it as that admin centre and then signing off at the end of the session in terms of grade, but to use it in a very day-to-day, up-to-date type of manner of recording, as it says there in the first place, to record, and not only to record but to manage our student marks. In other words, we don't have to really, I know that there are lecturers who are getting rid of their customary Excel grade sheets and just using Grade Centre straight away, even if they have multiple markers, and we'll be hearing about that later on. So there are different ways that we can use Grade Centre to become much more proficient in using it to record and manage marks for students. One of the things is to realise that Grade Centre data flows through to Retention Centre, and some of us might be familiar with Retention Centre and the different alert rules there. But also the data from Grade Centre flows through to the set of site analytics reports that we have under site analytics, and we'll look at those in just a moment. Here's a snapshot of Grade Centre, and there is something called the external grade mark. And I don't think there's a tool here that I can circle, is there? Yes, there is. Automate, and I'm hoping you can see my mouse, because it says that's what you should be seeing. So down here, up here within Grade Centre, we have the cumulative mark, has the green arrow points, and it also has a green tick next to it, which is on by default to the cumulative mark, and it's called the external grade, and it says yes, the mark is there. And so whatever is in this column, the cumulative mark, flows through to Grade Centre, and it also flows through to those integrated reports. And so that external grade, by the way, can be changed to other Grade Centre columns, and we may want to do that when we want to look at marks in a different way and the data and the timing. So the more dynamic in a more dynamic way, if we use Grade Centre in a more dynamic way, then we can use these reports in a more dynamic way. Instead of looking at data and what's happening historically, we can use it on a week-by-week basis if we wanted to. So there's one of the more efficient ways of using Grade Centre. Now, the data also flows through to that from that column I've just indicated. It flows through to retention center. And if you have double monitors, you may want to just be in one of your subject sites and following along as we go through these things and see if you can replicate what we're doing. It might help you, but you may be familiar with it already. But the retention center is found in the lower part of the subject navigation menu under the control panel and the evaluation, and there's retention center. Now, we're not going to go through retention center in detail. We've done that in other sessions, and we're happy to go further with retention center if we have other folk who are interested in using it, maybe on a school basis, to go through anything in terms of retention center. But just to realize that grade center can be quite potential in giving you the kind of things that you might be interested in and you haven't realized that. So there's a different set of rules, and one of them is the grade rule, and so you can set that rule to low, medium, high, and then you can go on to notify those students who have been identified in that grouping, if you like, and send them out notifications that's going to, again, encourage them to be engaged. Now, here's a snapshot of how you do that within Retention Center. The red arrow, well, the green arrow, I'll start with that then. There's a grade alert, and so you can set that up through a rule, and you are in control of that. It can be a high, a minimum, and it can be a in-between grade. And you do that through the red arrow where you customize, and you customize that rule. And if you've got marks in that cumulative mark column in grade center, then you will start getting information here. And you can sort by that grade alert column, either lowest to highest, highest to lowest. And each red dot indicates a drill down for those students. The other one that we want to just mention is the site analytics, and that's under the evaluation as well. And basically you can get, it's almost real time. It's data from your students up to about 2 a.m. of that morning. So if you were to run these reports in Site Analytics, you would be looking at student activity up till 2 a.m. This morning. And there are a set of 4 reports, and again, we're not going to go through them. We've done those in other professional learning sessions, but just to emphasize that these reports will be very effective for you if you use the grade center and maintain your marks up to date, and then these reports will be up to date, and it's quite amazing the things that you can glean from student activity. One of them is known as that site access and grade scatter plot. This is for a 2017 session 3, and excuse me, it's showing, as it says, it's showing each of those purple dots are different students and how they and it charts course accesses, and so it's basically saying, is there a relationship between the amount of time that my students come into my subject site and their mark that they are gaining? And you're able to analyze those sorts of things. We can do that according to accesses, we could do it according to their interactions or mouse clicks, or we could also look at the minutes spent in that subject site. And depending on the subject design and your pedagogical intent and how you've set things up, then you may want to use one or the other. So the invitation is there again that if this is hardly making sense, then certainly come back to us and ask some more questions about it, and we will go into more detail. The other one is the activity and grade matrix, and it's a heat map, and so you can see here from Melissa, she has a high grade, and she's also she's in the lower quadrant, percentile, decile as it is here, of student activity. Julia, she's got a high score, but she hasn't been into the site very often. And that, again, I can't interpret this. The subject owner would be able to do that. It might be that all the content is available through PDFs, and it simply means that Julia is studying most of her time offline, whereas the others are coming into the core sites on a more regular basis. So you can see how the story changes for each student depending upon your pedagogical intent and learning design. Now, Kirsten is going to carry on the story, and she's going into her subject. So I've given the theory in a sense, and Kirsten's now going to explain how she uses it in practice. Thanks, Kirsten.
Thanks, Stuart. I am using some notes too, so excuse me if I look up and down because I don't want to miss anything in 10 minutes. So I'm here to talk about how our school's using the Grade Centre as a first step in being able to gain the most useful analytics as we can to improve our teaching and our efficiency. So this is about using as much of the functionality as we can in the Grade Centre, which has the flow-on effect of using Interact more fully and being more comfortable with exploring what it offers for teaching and learning. One of our sessional tutors is also here, Kelly Jackson-Nash. She's been a sessional for us for several years and has been with us during the transition between how we did use Grade Centre and how we do now. So she may also be able to pop in and add some context for you. So for a bit of background, I trialled using the Grade Centre dynamically last year in a subject with about 450 students and maybe 12 sessional markers. And that was from working with a project officer in our school more broadly. So it wasn't about the Grade Centre, but she just encouraged me to take this approach. And it was really a pretty big leap of faith to be able to do that because I'm a bit of a control freak when it comes to my grade centres. I also do the grade checking in our school, so I'm conscious of how important it is that they're right in terms of for the students and also for the school assessment committee, and some accountability and transparency there. So to start with, all I could really see was some risks of markers putting the wrong marks in the wrong place, disasters really. And we had discussions in our CLTC meetings and our school assessment committee meetings to make sure that we're making defensible decisions about our approach. And in the end, what we came up with is that there's some risk attached, but the greater risk is that we would be employing sessional staff who are not able to complete these administrative aspects of their roles, which isn't the case in our school. So there's been the odd hiccup, but no disasters. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And hopefully you can see a grade centre for IKC 101.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so this session we had just over 250 students. We've used a tutor marker approach rather than one lecturer and sessional markers, and we each have about 50 students in our groups and do all the teaching and marking for that group. So, so that I can respect student confidentiality, I've hidden the student names and student numbers, and at the end I'll just go back and add them back in. So this is my full grade centre. I'll show you what I've added and how I use it and how our sessional staff within the subject use it. So first of all, when the first assessment task comes in, I ask the tutors to add their names to this tutor column, which is the third one along next to availability. And this means I can keep an eye on how, for example, the marking is progressing, and if necessary, contact a tutor or a marker to get an update on how it's going and to see if they need any extra support. For example, if it was a week before tasks needed to go back and I could see that a marker hadn't started yet, then I would contact them, as it means I'd have time to put a contingency in place if I needed to. The other thing this allows me to do is if a student contacts me, I have a very easy way to see who their tutor is. So I know whether I need to answer the question or if I need to refer it on to the tutor. And I know that there are other ways within Interact, like groups, to do this, but I find that just keeping my grade centres open all day is really helpful as I'm answering emails or talking with students on the phone. So there's around 500 students in the Subject Next session, so this actually becomes more useful the larger the cohort. So the first task here, Assessment 1, was a journal entry, and it was marked within Interact using a rubric which we embedded. So there's really no other admin which needed to happen there. The mark just comes across from the journal as the marker marks it, the tutor marks it. And students don't have access to their mark or feedback until I show them the column. And I wouldn't do that until the marking is complete and has been moderated. So I also add columns here you'll see for moderation and for extensions. The extension column negates the needs to keep spreadsheets or other records, and working with tutors, it means that the tutors can just enter the information straight in, and for me personally it means that I have done away with lists which may or may not be complete, spreadsheets, the same deal, and it's really helped with my organisation and my record keeping. It also means that the tutors themselves can apply the late penalties because they know whether their students have extensions, and so, you know, as a subject coordinator there's one less step there for me. So with the moderation column I've got one for each task. As subject coordinator, I moderate all fail and high distinction assessments as part of our moderation process in the school. So to do that I filter by the assessment. I'll do assessment 1 marks like this. I filter and all of the HDs are at the top, so I know that they're the ones I need to go in and moderate, and then I would click that again, and these are all the students who didn't submit, but these low ones here are ones that I also need to moderate, and then I do a range of other marks as well. Where it's my marking, I write a note in there for one of my colleagues to moderate. So in the past, markers would just email me with the tasks that they were a bit unsure about for me to moderate as well as the ones I usually would. But now they just write a comment in that column, and as I'm going through and finalising, I just know to take a look. I also write a note if I change any marks during moderation. I'll see if I can just find one here. Maybe one in a later. I don't think I changed any in assessment 1. So in this column here, I've got moderated up. So that's useful when it comes time to complete the assessment and moderation forms for the subject at the end of session. And it also allows a marker to see if they're a bit out and adjust or seek clarification if they need to. If a student contacts me with an issue about a mark for a particular task, I can quickly see whether or not that task was moderated, which may or may not influence how I then deal with the student's issue. So I haven't used any spreadsheets since I started using the Grade Centre like this. My tutors and I use Smart Views to get our group lists, and you could do the same thing for allocating markers to students if you didn't do this tutor approach. The markers could use Smart Views to get their list as well. So I have down the side in the Grade Centre, these are my Smart Views, and this is my group. So that means now I'm only seeing my group of 50 to 60 students. It doesn't delete or change anything in the Grade Centre by doing this. It just makes it easier for me to use it, and I can go back at any stage to the full Grade Centre like that. And actually setting up smart views is something I need to Google by looking at Blackboard Help every session, because it's just one of those things I don't do often enough to have it fully embedded. But Blackboard Help's quite quick and easy, so I just have a quick look at that. Okay, so what I can do from here and what I've done in other sessions is, for students, you can see the last access, there are some students who haven't accessed at all. So I click on them and then I click on email selected users, and I won't do it because it will bring their names up. But I can email them and say, I've just noticed that you haven't submitted your first or second or third assessment task, whatever it is, without an extension. So please get in touch, and then I can direct them to withdraw before census or special consideration or anything they might need. And yeah, so I can see who hasn't submitted a particular task if they didn't have an extension recorded and follow them up. I'll be using analytics more to support students in the future, but I suppose this is an effective way of doing it now, which just gets us into the space. There's only one thing that I've found so far that we keep separate records on, and that's we have a very early assessment task in the subject pre-census. So I do ask markers to keep track of how many students they mark for early on, just to ensure they're paid for their work. And that's because students who withdraw prior to census are removed from the subject in the grade centre. And I haven't yet found a way in grade centre to be able to track that. There haven't been many hiccups. We have a sessional staff organisational site in our school. So I use that space to keep in touch with markers and tutors and provide information and screenshots about how to, for example, use smart views or mark using the journal tool, things like that. They can then ask questions and clarify anything that they need to. We had one hiccup last year, and it was near the end of session. I just sent an announcement to students asking for them to double check that all their marks were correct. And one marker also got that announcement and misread it, thought it was directed to markers, and went in and changed hers to the pre-moderation marks because I had made a couple of changes. But it was a very easy fix. I just hid the column while I confirmed that the correct marks were in there. What else? I'm running out of time. So the rest of our school is now using this approach in our own subjects and in the hybrid subjects we teach into. For example, in hybrid subjects, students need to pass the Indigenous Study assessment task as a requirement for passing the subject overall. So we add a School of Indigenous Australian Studies column where we can leave comments on this for the subject coordinator and then for the person who's completing the final grade checking to ensure that that hybrid policy is adhered to. So this all takes a bit of time in setting it up, but for me, far less time in administering it overall. All markers and tutors need full staff access to be able to work in the grade centre, and I do take this back to non-grade staff access after all the final tasks have been marked, so that I'm confident in the integrity of the grade centre and that so nothing tricky can happen at final grade checking time. I download a copy of the grade centre with all of the columns in it at the end of session and file that in case I need it at a later stage, and then go into column organisation and hide all of the extra columns that I've added to prepare for final grade checking. And I'll show you how I do that very quickly. So all of these ones like tutor, moderation, extensions, like this, hide them. And then once the names were there, it's again just a very neat grade centre ready for whoever does the checking in the school. Okay, Kelly, did you want to add anything after my speed talking about how it has been for you?
I've found it very easy to use, very helpful with communication about which ones you've moderated and changed marks, and also for extensions. If you've, for whatever reason, have added an extension instead of me, I can see it straight away. So that's really easy. So it's been, yeah, really easy.
Good. Okay, I think that's it. I'm happy for anyone to email me, call me if they want any more information. And I wouldn't say I'm a grade centre guru at all. It's just not that scary once you get into it.
Great, thanks, Kirsten. That was a really nice overview. And when you're dealing with large cohorts, I can see how valuable this is to be managing all of your tutors as well. Now, does anyone have any questions for either Stuart or Kirsten? It was certainly, both of you have presented this very clearly, so it was really, really easy to work through it with you and understand the features. Stuart, you responded to my question about the viewing of pre-census enrolment data that Kirsten was talking about. It looks as though Grade Centre does not retain that data, Kirsten, that you were mentioning, so that's a bit of a shame. Okay, a question from David. How do you get groups into Grade Centre?
David, that is the smart views that we create a smart view for each of the groups that we have already set up within the groups function. So like I said, this is one where I have to Google, but I'm going to try and remember. So I click into smart views and then you can create a smart view here.
Now you're not showing your screen there, Kirsten, so if you're showing
Of
you
course
something...
I'm not. Of course I'm not. Okay, let me go again. Okay, I'll just go back. So into manage and smart views, and these are the smart views I have here, and then you can create another one. And like I said, I don't know why I can't retain this information session to session, but it is something I'm in the process of setting this up for session 2 now, and I'll just need to sit for 5 minutes and watch the Blackboard help, and I'll have it again. But I'm happy when I have that link, David, I could send it to you if you like.
Okay, so when you're saying that you're having to reset this each session, it's not as though you can create like a template that you could then apply the next session.
Maybe it is. I have no idea though. I just set it up. It doesn't take very long at all. I'm setting up my groups at the moment, and then the next step will be the smart views. Okay, Stuart?
In chat, I've placed the link for Blackboard help on smart views. So the link is there for those who go into chat. And it is quite useful. It's text-based and there's a video as well. And it's not all that difficult. As I said earlier, we're not talking about rocket science here. It's just pretty simple stuff. And it's go ahead and use those smart views. You'd be surprised how efficient you will become just using it yourself.
Okay, so now another question was, and I think we may have already have this covered, but do you have to set this up for each subject offering individually, or can you share some of the setup between subject sites?
I have no idea. For me, I just do it as part of my setup with each subject as I'm going through and setting everything up prior to the start of session. I just do this as a part of that. And maybe that is an extra dimension that I can look into, but I'm not there.
Stuart, so that's getting back to that initial question from moving it from session to session. It sounds as though there isn't a feature within Grade Centre that will allow you to replicate the setup between subject sites.
No, and I'm not sure that you could, in a sense, because you're dealing with a whole different group of students, and also potentially a different set of markers as well. So the names would change, and the numbers of students enrolled. So you might want to change the number of students in a group.
Well, I have 5 groups this session, and I will have 10 groups next session.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
That anyway.
So it's not that onerous really to have it systematized and set up. Otherwise, yeah, there's too many other variables, and to systematize it, even if you could, may be a disadvantage, not an advantage in the end.
Yeah, yeah.